The morning sun cast long shadows across the memorial gardens of Kepler Station, where the tomb of the unknown soldier stood in silent majesty. The massive crystalline structure rose 30 meters into the artificial sky, its surface reflecting the names of 10,000 species who had fallen during the Void War. At its base, carved from solid Andromedan marble, lay the sarcophagus containing the remains of the single most honored warrior in galactic history. Seth Cree stood motionless at his post, his forearms crossed in the traditional stance of the Valorian Honor Guard. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed purple-black in the morning light, and his compound eyes tracked every movement in the gardens with mechanical precision. For 300 cycles, his people had served as guardians of this sacred place. It was the highest honor their warrior culture could achieve. The Valorians had been chosen for this duty because of their unwavering sense of honor and their inability to lie. Their neural structure made deception impossible, and their warrior code demanded absolute adherence to protocol. No species in the known galaxy was more trusted with sacred duties. Today marked the anniversary of the Void War's end, and thousands of beings from across the spiral arm would come to pay their respects. Delegates from the crystalline Asari would sing their harmonic morning songs. The gaseous nebulans would shift their forms into memorial patterns. Even the proud Altarian Empire would send their golden-crowned princes to bow before the tomb. But it was the humans who puzzled Seth Cree most. They came in small groups, often families with younglings. Unlike other species who approached with formal ceremony, the humans would simply stand quietly, sometimes placing small objects near the tomb's base. Flowers from distant worlds, worn pieces of metal they called dog tags, or faded images on primitive paper. Their emotions ran deep and chaotic, nothing like the ordered grief of other civilized species. The sound of running feet broke Seth Cree's meditation. A small human child, perhaps 8 standard years old, came sprinting around the corner of the memorial path. His dark hair was disheveled, his clothes torn at the knees, and tears streaked down his dirt-smudged face. The boy clutched something tightly in his small fist. Behind him, slower but determined, came 2 adult humans calling his name. "Tommy, Tommy, come back." The child ignored them and ran straight toward the tomb. Seth Cree's combat reflexes engaged automatically. No one was permitted to approach the sacred resting place without proper ceremony. The memorial gardens had specific paths and protocols that all visitors must follow. The boy skidded to a halt just meters from the crystalline steps, breathing heavily. His wide blue eyes looked up at the towering structure, then fixed on Seth Cree with startling intensity. "Please," the child gasped, still catching his breath. "Please arrest me." Seth Cree's mandibles clicked in confusion. In 3 centuries of guard duty, no one had ever made such a request. His translator implant struggled with the human's words, checking and rechecking the meaning. "I do not understand, young human," Seth Cree replied, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones of his species. "Explain your meaning." The boy's parents finally caught up, both breathing hard. The male human, tall with graying hair, placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said to Seth Cree. "We'll take him home. He's been upset all morning." "No." Tommy shrugged away from his father's touch. "I have to tell him. I have to." He looked back up at the imposing alien guard. "I broke the rules. I took something that doesn't belong to me. My dad says when you do wrong things, you have to face the consequences. So please arrest me." The female human, clearly the boy's mother, knelt beside him. Her eyes were red with tears. "Tommy, honey, it's okay. We understand why you did it. But it's not okay," the boy protested. "Great-grandpa would be so disappointed in me. He taught me to always be honest, always do the right thing. And I didn't." Seth Cree found himself studying the human family with growing fascination. The emotional dynamics between them were complex beyond his understanding. Yet there was something compelling about the youngling's distress. The child's words about honesty and doing right resonated with Valorian concepts of honor. "What is this item you believe you have taken improperly?" Seth Cree asked. Tommy opened his small fist to reveal a tarnished metal disc hanging from a worn chain. Even from several meters away, Seth Cree could see the markings of human military identification. "These are the dog tags my great-grandpa wore in the war," Tommy said, his voice small and ashamed. "Mom and Dad were bringing them here today to leave them at the tomb like people do. But I wanted to hold them during the ceremony. I snuck them out of Dad's coat pocket this morning. The boy's father stepped forward. His great-grandfather died in the final battle of the Void War. Tommy never met him, but he's heard all the stories. He's been looking forward to this day for months. When we discovered the tags were missing, the mother added, Tommy panicked and ran. He thought we'd be angry with him. Zethkri's compound eyes fixed on the small metal disc in the child's hand. Something about its worn surface triggered a memory subroutine in his neural implants. The identification markings, the specific alloy composition, the pattern of wear around the edges. His database cross-referenced the information against the memorial records. What he found made his secondary heart skip a beat. The name etched into the metal matched one in his most sacred files. Not just any name, but the name. The one known to every species in the galaxy, spoken with reverence across 10,000 worlds, Thomas Mitchell, Sergeant 1st Human Expeditionary Force, the Unknown Soldier. But that was impossible. The Unknown Soldier's identity had been lost in the chaos of the final battle. His remains had been found in the wreckage of the Void Breach, but all identifying materials had been destroyed by exotic radiation. The entire point of the memorial was that he represented all the unnamed heroes who had died saving the galaxy. Unless the records were wrong. Unless this small human child held the key to the greatest mystery in galactic history. Zethkri looked down at Tommy, seeing him with new eyes. The boy continued to hold out the dog tags, waiting for judgment. His young face set with determined honesty despite his obvious fear. Young human, Zethkri said carefully. Before I decide whether to arrest you, perhaps you could tell me more about your great-grandfather's service. Tommy wiped his nose with the back of his free hand, still clutching the dog tags protectively. His parents exchanged worried glances, but neither interrupted as their son began to speak. Great-grandpa Tom was really brave, Tommy began, his voice growing stronger as he talked about his hero. He wasn't supposed to be a soldier at first. He was a teacher before the war started. But when the void ships came and started destroying everything, he said somebody had to stand up and fight. Zethkri's translator worked overtime processing the emotional undertones in the child's words. Human speech patterns were notoriously complex, layered with meanings that went far beyond the literal words. But there was something pure about this youngling's account, an honesty that resonated with Valorian sensibilities. Dad told me that great-grandpa Tom was scared when he enlisted, Tommy continued. He didn't know anything about fighting or spaceships or alien technology, but he learned. He learned because he had to protect people. The boy's father nodded solemnly. My grandfather was 42 when the war started. Most of the human military was made up of kids barely out of school. But Tom felt responsible for his students, his community. He couldn't stand by and watch them suffer. Zethkri accessed his historical databases cross-referencing the timeline. The early days of the Void War had indeed been devastating for younger species like humanity. The void entities were unlike anything the galaxy had encountered before, beings of pure entropy that consumed matter and energy indiscriminately. Traditional military tactics had proven useless against them. The stories say great-grandpa Tom was part of something called the 1st Human Expeditionary Force, Tommy said, unconsciously echoing the exact designation Zethkri had found in the dog tag records. They were sent to the edge of the galaxy where the void ships were coming through. Tommy's mother knelt beside him again, her voice gentle but proud. Your great-grandfather wrote letters home. We still have some of them. He talked about the other soldiers from different worlds, how they all had to learn to work together even though they were so different. This detail struck Zethkri as significant. The formation of the first truly integrated galactic military force had been one of the war's most remarkable achievements. Before the Void Crisis, most species fought only alongside their own kind. The desperate need for cooperation had forged bonds that still held the galactic community together today. What happened to him during the final battle? Zethkri asked, though he dreaded the answer. Every schoolchild in the galaxy knew the story of the Void Breach, when the enemy had nearly succeeded in creating a permanent gateway between dimensions. Tommy's face scrunched up as he tried to remember the details. Dad says great-grandpa Tom was part of a special mission. A small group of soldiers from different worlds who volunteered to go into the breach itself. They had to carry some kind of bomb deep inside and set it off manually. A quantum implosion device, Tommy's father clarified. The only weapon that could collapse the dimensional gateway. But someone had to stay behind to activate it. The volunteer squad knew it was a one-way mission. Zethkri's compound eyes widened. The sacrifice at the Void Breach was legendary, spoken of in reverent tones across every civilized world. 13 soldiers from 12 different species had entered the heart of the enemy dimension. None had returned, but their sacrifice had saved trillions of lives. The unknown soldier's tomb contained the only recovered remains from that final mission, found floating in space weeks after the breach collapsed. Genetic analysis had confirmed the being was from one of the volunteer species, but the exotic energies had made specific identification impossible. The last transmission from the squad was just a few words. Tommy continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. Someone said, "For our children's future." Then everything went quiet. Those exact words were inscribed in 37 different languages around the base of the tomb. They had become something of a sacred phrase throughout the galaxy, repeated at memorial services and graduation ceremonies. The fact that this human child knew them suggested his family's connection to the events was deeper than coincidence. Zethkri found himself facing an unprecedented situation. His honor code demanded absolute protection of the tomb's sanctity, but it also required him to seek truth above all else. If these dog tags truly belonged to the unknown soldier, then this child and his family deserved to know. More than that, the galaxy deserved to know. "Young Tommy," Zethkri said formally, "I must ask you a question of great importance. These dog tags you carry, have they ever been examined by galactic historians or military archivists?" Tommy shook his head. "Mom and Dad wanted to bring them here today because it felt right. Great-Grandpa Tom never came home and we never knew exactly what happened to him. The military just said he was missing in action, presumed dead. We figured this would be a good place to honor his memory. Even if he's not really the unknown soldier," his mother added. "This tomb represents all the heroes who never made it home. Tom deserves to be remembered alongside them." The simple humanity of that statement hit Zethkri like a physical blow. Here was this family, carrying their private grief and pride, willing to add their small memorial to the greater monument. They sought no glory, no recognition, just a place to remember their lost patriarch. It was such a distinctly human approach to honor. Other species built elaborate individual monuments or composed epic songs about their heroes. Humans created shared spaces where private sorrows could become communal strength. "Before I make any decisions about your request for arrest," Zethkri said carefully, "would you permit me to examine these identification tags more closely? I promise no harm will come to them." Tommy looked up at his parents, seeking guidance. His father placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's your choice, son. They belong to your great-grandfather. What do you think he would want you to do?" Tommy considered this with the serious concentration only children could manage. He looked at the gleaming tomb, then at the imposing alien guard, then down at the worn metal in his palm. "Great-Grandpa Tom always said you should trust people who are trying to help," Tommy decided. "And you haven't arrested me yet, even though I confessed to stealing. So I think you're probably a good person, even if you do look like a scary bug." Despite the gravity of the situation, Zethkri's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. The child's innocent honesty was refreshing after centuries of formal diplomatic interactions. Tommy stepped forward and carefully placed the dog tags in one of Zethkri's lower hands. The metal felt warm from the boy's grip, and surprisingly heavy for such a small object. As Zethkri's enhanced senses analyzed the artifacts, his certainty grew. The molecular composition, the manufacturing date, even microscopic traces of exotic radiation that matched the Void Breach signature. Every detail confirmed what the database search had already suggested. The unknown soldier had a name, and his great-grandson had just asked to be arrested for the crime of loving him. Zethkri's internal sensors completed their analysis in seconds, but he spent long minutes staring at the small metal disc in his palm. The implications of what he had discovered threatened to overwhelm even his disciplined Valorian mind. The dog tags were authentic, no question. But more than that, traces of quantum signature embedded in the metal matched exactly with residual energy patterns found at the Void Breach site. These tags had been through the dimensional gateway and back. They had survived the impossible. "Honored guard?" Tommy's father asked quietly. "Is everything all right?" Zethkri realized he had been standing motionless for several minutes, his compound eyes fixed on the tags. The human family waited patiently, though he could sense their growing anxiety through their body language and chemical signatures. I must contact the Memorial Council immediately, Zethkri announced, his voice carrying harmonics of deep reverence. These artifacts are of profound historical significance. Tommy's face paled. Am I in really big trouble? I didn't mean to cause problems. I just wanted to hold something that belonged to Great-Grandpa Tom. You are not in trouble, young one, Zethkri assured him. But what you have brought here today may change our understanding of galactic history. Before the family could respond, Zethkri activated his emergency communication array. The crystalline projector hummed to life, casting holographic symbols into the air as he transmitted on the highest priority channels. Within moments, the space around the tomb shimmered with incoming transmissions. First to appear was Counselor Vexithera of the Asari, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic concern. Next came Admiral Korath of the Altarian fleet, his golden armor gleaming even through the holographic projection. Representatives from a dozen species materialized in rapid succession. Guardian Zethkri, Counselor Vexithera chimed, her voice like wind through crystal caves. Your emergency signal suggests a threat to the memorial site. What is the nature of this crisis? Zethkri looked down at the human family, particularly at Tommy, who was now hiding partially behind his father's leg, but still watching everything with wide, fascinated eyes. The boy had come here asking to be arrested for a minor transgression, and instead had triggered the largest gathering of galactic officials in decades. Honored counselors, Zethkri began formally, I present to you Thomas Mitchell, age 8 standard years, great-grandson of Sergeant Thomas Mitchell of the 1st Human Expeditionary Force. The assembled holograms flickered with confusion. Admiral Korath spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. While we respect all descendants of war veterans, Guardian, this hardly seems to warrant an emergency assembly. With respect, Admiral, Zethkri replied, raising the dog tags for all to see. I believe Sergeant Thomas Mitchell was the soldier whose remains rest in this tomb. The silence that followed was absolute. Several holographic projections flickered as their sources struggled to process this information. Counselor Vexithara's crystalline form shifted through several different harmonic frequencies before settling into what Zethkri recognized as profound shock. That is impossible, Admiral Korath stated flatly. The unknown soldier's identity was lost. Every piece of identifying material was destroyed by dimensional energy exposure. Not every piece, Zethkri countered, holding up the tags. These bear quantum signatures consistent with void breach exposure. They carry the name and service number of Sergeant Thomas Mitchell, and they have been in the possession of his family since the war's end. Tommy tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad, what's happening? Why are all these aliens talking about Great-Grandpa Tom? His father knelt down, trying to explain something that seemed impossible even to adult minds. Son, I think they're saying that Great-Grandpa Tom might be buried in this tomb. That he might be the unknown soldier everyone comes here to remember. Tommy looked up at the towering crystal structure with new understanding. You mean Great-Grandpa Tom is famous? Like really famous across the whole galaxy? If this proves true, Counselor Vexithera chimed softly, your great-grandfather is perhaps the most honored being in galactic history. The boy's reaction was not what any of the aliens expected. Instead of excitement or pride, Tommy's face crumpled with worry. But that can't be right. Great-Grandpa Tom was just a regular person. He was a teacher. He liked to fish and tell stories and help kids with their homework. He wasn't some kind of superhero. This simple statement caused another ripple of confusion among the assembled officials. They were accustomed to heroes being larger than life, beings of exceptional skill or breeding or technology. The idea that the galaxy's greatest champion had been an ordinary individual challenged their fundamental assumptions about greatness. Dr. Yelith of the Archaeological Institute materialized in the group, her tentacled form already cycling through research protocols. We must verify these claims immediately. I can have a full forensic team here within the hour to examine both the artifacts and the tomb contents. Wait, Tommy's mother interrupted, stepping protectively closer to her son. What exactly are you planning to do? And what does this mean for our family? The question highlighted a problem none of the officials had considered. In their excitement over solving the historical mystery, they had forgotten about the living people involved. Tommy and his family had come here for a private moment of remembrance and found themselves at the center of galactic attention. Admiral Korath's projection shifted to face the humans directly. If your ancestor is indeed the unknown soldier, then your family has unknowingly guarded one of our most precious relics. This discovery will reshape memorial services across every world. But we just wanted to leave the tags here and say goodbye, Tommy said, his voice small and overwhelmed. We didn't want to make everything complicated. Zethekri found himself in an unprecedented position. His duty was to protect the sanctity of the tomb, but he was also witnessing something profound about human nature. This family had carried their grief privately for decades, seeking no recognition or reward. They had come to honor their ancestor alongside all the unnamed heroes, willing to let his memory become part of something larger than themselves. It was the most selfless act he had witnessed in 3 centuries of service. Honored counselors, Zethekri announced, his voice carrying new authority. I request a formal hearing before any procedures begin. This family has rights that must be considered. Tommy looked up at the towering alien guard with surprise and gratitude. Despite his frightening appearance, Zethekri was protecting them when they felt small and overwhelmed. Thank you, Mr. Guard, Tommy said solemnly. You didn't arrest me like I asked, but you're helping us anyway. Great-Grandpa Tom would have liked you. The simple sincerity of those words resonated across the communication array. Here was a human child, faced with news that would change his life forever, thinking not of fame or glory, but of what his ancestor would have wanted. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had won the Void War. The Memorial Council convened an emergency session within hours, their holographic forms creating a circle around the tomb. Representatives from every major species sat in judgment. While Tommy and his family found themselves at the center of galactic attention they had never sought. Zethekri had insisted on formal protocols to protect the humans' rights. As the Discovering Guardian, he served as their advocate, a role that stretched his understanding of duty in unexpected directions. For 3 centuries, he had protected the tomb from threats. Now he found himself protecting the tomb's meaning from bureaucracy. Dr. Yillith presented her preliminary findings to the assembled council. Her tentacles manipulated holographic displays showing molecular analysis, quantum signatures, and temporal dating. Every test confirmed what Zethekri's initial scan had revealed. The evidence is conclusive, she announced, her translator converting her species' chemical communications into standard galactic. These identification tags belong to the being whose remains rest in the tomb. The quantum signature match is exact, down to 17 decimal places. Counselor Vexithera's crystalline form shifted through colors of deep contemplation. This discovery requires us to reconsider the entire meaning of the memorial. The unknown soldier was chosen specifically because his identity was lost. He represented all the unnamed heroes of the war. And now he has a name, Admiral Korath added, though his tone suggested this was problematic rather than celebratory. How do we explain to the billions who have visited this shrine that our central symbol has been transformed? Tommy had been listening quietly, but at this comment he stepped forward. His small voice carried clearly across the gathered officials. But having a name doesn't make him less special, Tommy said, his child's logic cutting through complex philosophical debate. It just means we know more about him. Great-Grandpa Tom would still want to represent all the other soldiers who didn't come home. The council fell silent at this simple wisdom. Here was an 8-year-old human solving a problem that had confounded some of the galaxy's greatest minds. Tommy's father placed a supportive hand on his son's shoulder and continued the thought. My grandfather enlisted to protect his students and his community. He never wanted personal glory. I think he would be honored to know that his sacrifice gave comfort to families across the galaxy, regardless of what name was on his grave. Zethekri found himself studying the human family with growing admiration. Faced with the revelation that their ancestor was history's most celebrated hero, they showed no desire for personal gain. Instead, they worried about how the discovery might affect others who found meaning in the memorial. It was quintessentially human behavior, this concern for strangers they would never meet. Commander Thessarian of the Nexus Coalition raised a practical concern. If we acknowledge the soldier's identity, what becomes of existing memorial protocols? Every species has developed traditions around visiting the unknown soldier. Do we invalidate decades of religious and cultural practice? Tommy's mother spoke up, her voice gaining strength as she found her footing in this unprecedented situation. Why would anything have to change? Tom's identity doesn't alter what he did or what he meant to people. If anything, Knowing his story might help others understand why the sacrifice mattered. Dr. Yillith manipulated her displays to show archived footage from the final battle. The images were fragmentary, captured by long-range sensors as the volunteer squad entered the void breach. 13 figures in environmental suits, each representing a different species, walking deliberately toward certain death. The squad knew they would not return, Dr. Yillith explained. The quantum implosion device required manual activation from within the dimensional gateway. They volunteered not for glory, but because someone had to ensure the mission succeeded. Tommy watched the grainy footage with wide eyes. Is that Great-Grandpa Tom? One of those figures, yes, Dr. Yillith confirmed. The records show Sergeant Mitchell volunteered immediately when the mission parameters were explained. No hesitation, no conditions. Simply, I'll go. That sounds like him, Tommy said quietly. Dad always said Great-Grandpa Tom never backed down when someone needed help. Zethkri accessed deeper files, searching for details about the final mission. What he found painted a picture of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The volunteer squad had faced not just certain death, but the possibility that their sacrifice might fail to save anyone. The dimensional gateway was unstable, Zethkri shared with the council. Calculations suggested only a 60% probability that the quantum implosion would successfully collapse the breach. The volunteers knew they might die for nothing. Admiral Korath's golden armor dulled as he processed this information. To face death with certainty is one thing. To face meaningless death requires something more. Hope, Tommy said simply. Great-Grandpa Tom always said you had to have hope, even when things looked impossible. Otherwise, what was the point of trying? The word hung in the air among the assembled dignitaries. Hope. Such a simple concept, yet it had driven 13 beings to sacrifice everything for a chance to save people they had never met and never would meet. Counselor Vexithera's harmonic voice carried new understanding. Perhaps the revelation of the soldier's identity does not diminish the memorial's meaning. Perhaps it enhances it. To know that the unknown soldier was Thomas Mitchell, teacher and protector, gives substance to the symbol. But more than that, Zethkri added, his own understanding deepening. It reveals something profound about the species that produced him. Humans face impossible odds not because they believe they will win, but because they believe the attempt itself has value. Tommy looked up at the towering alien guard with surprise. You understand Great-Grandpa Tom better than most people do. I am beginning to understand all humans better, Zethkri replied honestly. Your species approaches honor differently than mine. We follow rigid codes and ancient traditions. You follow your hearts toward what is right, even when the path is unclear. The council continued to debate procedures and protocols, but the real decision had already been made. The evidence was undeniable, and the human family's response had shown them how to honor both the symbol and the man. Tommy tugged on his father's sleeve again. Dad, if Great-Grandpa Tom is really in this tomb, does that mean we can visit him whenever we want? His father smiled, the first truly relaxed expression he had worn since the morning began. I think we can visit him whenever we need to, son. This has always been his home. Now we just know for sure. As the formal hearing continued, Zethkri found himself watching the human child who had started everything with a simple request to be arrested. Tommy had come seeking consequences for what he saw as wrongdoing, and instead had revealed the greatest mystery in galactic history. It was exactly the kind of paradox that made humans so remarkable. They never seemed to accomplish what they set out to do, yet somehow always achieved something more important than they had imagined possible. The formal decision came at sunset, when the artificial sky of Kepler Station painted the memorial gardens in shades of gold and purple. The council had deliberated for hours, but in the end, Tommy's simple wisdom had guided their conclusion. Counselor Vexithera's pronouncement resonated across the communication array. Let it be recorded that the unknown soldier shall remain unknown to honor all who fell unnamed, while Thomas Mitchell shall be remembered as the teacher who became a hero. Both truths can exist in the same sacred space. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. The tomb would retain its role as a memorial to all unidentified casualties of the war, while a new inscription would tell Thomas Mitchell's specific story. Visitors could honor both the symbol and the man, understanding that heroism often wore the face of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Tommy clapped his hands together with delight. So Great-Grandpa Tom gets to keep helping people remember all the other soldiers? He would really like that. Dr. Yillith had spent the afternoon analyzing every detail of the dog tags and cross-referencing them with historical records. Her findings painted a picture of the final mission that was both more tragic and more inspiring than anyone had imagined. Sergeant Mitchell was not originally selected for the volunteer squad, she announced to the assembled council. The initial roster was complete with 13 members, but one of the volunteers, a young Andromedan navigator, suffered a critical injury during pre-mission training. She paused, manipulating her display to show personnel records from that chaotic final week of the war. Thomas Mitchell was serving as a training instructor for new recruits. When he learned of the navigator's injury, he volunteered to take the place of someone he had been teaching. He gave up his relative safety to protect a student. Tommy's mother pressed her hand to her mouth, tears flowing freely. That's exactly what he would do. Tom never could stand to see his students in danger. But here's what makes it remarkable, Dr. Yillith continued. Sergeant Mitchell had no training for the specific mission requirements. He was a ground-based infantry instructor, not a specialist in dimensional warfare or quantum demolitions. He volunteered knowing he was the least qualified member of the squad. Admiral Korath's golden armor gleamed as he processed this information. Why would the mission commanders accept such a substitution? Surely they could have found a more suitable replacement. Because there was no time, Dr. Yillith explained. The void breach was expanding exponentially. Every hour of delay meant billions more lives at risk. They needed 13 volunteers immediately, regardless of specialization. Zethkri felt something shift in his understanding of honor. For Valorians, honor came from excellence, from being the best possible warrior for your role. But Thomas Mitchell had found honor in being merely adequate for a task that needed doing. He wasn't the most skilled soldier, Zethkri mused aloud. He wasn't the most experienced. He simply saw a need and filled it. That's what teachers do, Tommy said matter-of-factly. Great-Grandpa Tom always said that sometimes being a teacher meant learning new things right alongside your students. You don't have to know everything, you just have to be willing to try. The profound simplicity of this philosophy rippled through the assembled representatives. Each species had developed complex hierarchies of merit and achievement. Yet here was evidence that true heroism might come not from surpassing others, but from stepping forward when stepping forward was needed. Counselor Vexus Thera's crystalline form shifted to deep blue harmonics of contemplation. This revelation changes our understanding of the sacrifice at Void Breach. We assumed it was performed by the galaxy's finest warriors. Instead, it was accomplished by ordinary beings who chose to become extraordinary. 12 of the finest warriors, Tommy corrected politely, and Great-Grandpa Tom. The distinction hit the council like a physical force. 12 beings at the peak of their species' military capability, and one teacher who volunteered because a student needed help. The mathematics of heroism had just been rewritten. As the formal ceremonies concluded, the council began planning for the changes that would transform the memorial site. New inscriptions would be carved, additional monuments erected, and educational programs developed to share Thomas Mitchell's story with visiting pilgrims. But Tommy had a different concern entirely. Mr. Guard, he said to Zethkri, I still broke the rules this morning. I took something that didn't belong to me without permission. Shouldn't there be consequences for that? Zethkri looked down at the small human who had changed galactic history with an act of inadvertent theft. The boy's moral compass remained fixed on doing right regardless of circumstances, a trait that explained much about both him and his species. You did indeed take something without permission, Zethkri acknowledged formally. However, the item rightfully belonged to your family. Your great-grandfather's dog tags were never military property to be confiscated. They were personal effects that should have been returned to his next of kin. Tommy's father stepped forward. You mean we should have had them all along? According to galactic law regarding personal effects of deceased service members, yes, Dr. Yillith confirmed after quickly consulting legal databases. The tags should have been returned to his family immediately after the war. Their absence from your possession was the true crime. This revelation reframed everything. Tommy hadn't stolen anything. He had reclaimed what was rightfully his family's heritage. But more than that, he had been carrying forward his great-grandfather's values without realizing it. So I'm not a thief? Tommy asked hopefully. You are a boy who loves his great-grandfather and wanted to carry a piece of him to honor his memory, Zethkri replied. That is not theft. That is devotion. Tommy beamed up at the imposing alien guard. You're really nice, Mr. Guard. I was scared of you at first because you look so different. But you're just trying to do the right thing. Like Great-Grandpa Tom taught me. The simple acceptance in the child's words struck Zethkri with unexpected force. Here was a being from an entirely different species, with radically different physical form and cultural background, yet Tommy had seen past surface differences to recognize shared values. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had made the integrated galactic military possible during the war. Humans seemed uniquely capable of finding common ground with anyone willing to work toward shared goals. As the sun set fully and the memorial gardens activated their gentle evening illumination, the various council members began signing off from the communication array, but several requested permission to visit the site in person, to see for themselves the place where galactic history had been rewritten by a small boy's confession. Tommy was already making plans. Dad, can we come back tomorrow? I want to bring flowers for Great-Grandpa Tom, and maybe some of those cookies he used to like. Do you think he would enjoy having visitors? I think he would love it, his father replied. And I think we're going to have lots of company. People from across the galaxy are going to want to learn about Thomas Mitchell. That's okay, Tommy decided. Great-Grandpa Tom always liked meeting new people. He said every person had something interesting to teach if you just listened. As the family prepared to leave, Zethkri made an unprecedented decision. Tommy, he called out, would you like to visit the tomb again tomorrow? I could tell you more stories about the memorial and the people who come here. Tommy's face lit up with excitement. Really? You would do that? It would be my honor, Zethkri replied and meant it completely. 3 months after Tommy's confession, the Memorial Gardens had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. What had once been a solemn place of quiet reflection had become a vibrant center of interspecies learning and connection. Zethkri stood at his traditional post, but his duties had expanded far beyond simple guard work. He had become the memorial's chief educator, sharing the story of Thomas Mitchell with visitors from across the known galaxy. More importantly, he had become Tommy's friend and unofficial mentor in galactic affairs. The boy visited almost daily after school, bringing fresh flowers, his homework, and an endless stream of questions about the different species who came to pay their respects. His natural curiosity and complete lack of fear had made him something of a celebrity among the alien visitors. Mr. Zethkri, Tommy called out as he ran up the memorial path, his school bag bouncing behind him. Guess what I learned in history class today? The Valorian Guard had grown accustomed to Tommy's enthusiastic approach to education. What fascinating discovery have you made, young scholar? My teacher told us about the Battle of Rigel 7, where humans and Valorians fought together for the first time, Tommy said proudly. She said it was really hard because your people and mine think about fighting so differently. Zethkri's compound eyes reflected approval. Human education systems were remarkably thorough, teaching their young about the complexities of galactic cooperation rather than simply celebrating their own species' achievements. Your teacher is correct, Zethkri confirmed. Valorians approach warfare with rigid tactical precision. Humans tend to improvise and adapt moment by moment. Initially, our strategies were incompatible. Tommy set down his bag and began arranging fresh daisies around the base of the tomb, a ritual he had maintained since learning of his great-grandfather's identity. But you figured out how to work together, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be friends with me now. The simple logic never failed to amaze Zethkri. Tommy had an intuitive understanding of cooperation that many trained diplomats lacked. To him, working together was simply what beings did when they cared about the same things. We learned that different approaches could complement each other, Zethkri explained. Valorian planning combined with human adaptability created strategies neither species could achieve alone. A group of nebular pilgrims approached the tomb, their gaseous forms shifting through respectful memorial patterns. Tommy waved cheerfully at them, and they responded by forming a brief harmonic display of greeting. These interactions had become commonplace. Much to the amazement of galactic sociologists, Dr. Yillith materialized nearby, her tentacles manipulating recording equipment as she continued her ongoing study of the memorial's transformation. Her research had evolved from archaeological investigation to sociological phenomenon. The changes here are unprecedented, she told Zethkri during a brief lull in visitor traffic. We're seeing interspecies interaction patterns that contradict decades of established behavioral theory. How so? Zethekri inquired, though he suspected he knew the answer. Watch the boy, Dr. Yilith suggested. He approaches every new species with identical enthusiasm. No fear, no hesitation, no deference to established diplomatic protocols. And remarkably, every species responds positively to his openness. Tommy was currently engaged in animated conversation with a group of crystalline Asari youth, attempting to explain the rules of a human game called Tag. The universal translator struggled with concepts like being it, but the young beings seemed to grasp the essential idea of playful pursuit. Children often display behaviors that adults have been trained away from, Zethekri observed. Tommy sees visitors as potential friends rather than alien entities requiring careful protocol. Exactly, Dr. Yilith agreed. And his approach is influencing adult behavior. We're documenting increased casual interaction between species groups at memorial sites across the galaxy. The Tommy effect, as some researchers are calling it. The phenomenon had indeed spread beyond Kepler Station. News of the human boy who had solved the unknown soldier mystery through honest confession had captured imaginations across dozens of worlds. More importantly, his example of treating all beings as potential friends was inspiring similar openness in others. Admiral Korath approached the memorial, his golden armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. Since the discovery, he had become a regular visitor, often bringing young Altarian officers to hear the story firsthand. Guardian Zethekri, he greeted formally, then nodded to Tommy. Young Mitchell. Hi, Admiral Korath. Tommy replied cheerfully. Did you bring more students today? Indeed. 3 junior officers who are studying interspecies cooperation tactics. Korath's formal demeanor softened slightly when addressing the boy. They are particularly interested in your great-grandfather's decision to volunteer for a mission he was not qualified for. Tommy considered this seriously. I think Great-Grandpa Tom would say that being qualified isn't just about knowing how to do things. It's also about caring enough to try your best even when you're scared. One of the young Altarian officers stepped forward, his golden scales bright with curiosity. But how did he overcome the fear? Altarian warriors train for years to face death with honor. Maybe he didn't overcome it, Tommy suggested. Maybe he just decided that helping his student was more important than being scared. Great-Grandpa Tom always said courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing the right thing even when you were afraid. The officers exchanged glances, processing this perspective on courage that differed markedly from their traditional military training. In Altarian culture, fearlessness was the highest martial virtue. The idea that courage might coexist with fear was revolutionary. Dr. Yilith's equipment hummed as she recorded the exchange. These impromptu philosophy lessons had become a regular feature of memorial visits, with Tommy unconsciously teaching concepts that professional educators struggled to convey. Your great-grandfather's legacy continues through your words, Zethekri told Tommy as the Altarian group moved on to examine the memorial inscriptions. Tommy blushed slightly at the praise. I just try to remember the things he taught my dad and my dad taught me, like being honest and helping people, and trying to understand how others feel. Those are the lessons that won the Void War. Zethekri realized aloud, not superior weapons or tactics, but the willingness to understand and cooperate with beings completely unlike ourselves. A chime from Tommy's communicator indicated his parents were approaching to walk him home. As he gathered his school things, he paused to look up at the towering crystal memorial. Mr. Zethekri, do you think Great-Grandpa Tom knew that volunteering for that mission would help so many people learn about working together? Zethekri considered the question carefully. I believe your great-grandfather made his choice based on immediate need, without considering long-term consequences. But perhaps that is exactly why his sacrifice became so meaningful. He acted from love and duty, not for recognition or historical importance. Tommy nodded solemnly. That sounds like him. He always said the best way to help the future was to do your best right now. As Tommy's parents arrived and the family prepared to leave for the day, Zethekri reflected on how completely his understanding of honor had evolved. The Valorian concept of rigid adherence to codes and protocols seemed less important now than the human approach of flexible response to need. Tommy had taught him that true honor might lie not in following rules perfectly, but in knowing when compassion should guide action instead of protocol. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new questions, and new opportunities for a small human boy to demonstrate that the galaxy's greatest heroes had always been ordinary people who chose to be extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. 1 year after Tommy's confession, the Memorial Gardens hosted the first annual Unity Day celebration. Representatives from every species in the galactic community had gathered, not just to honor the unknown soldier, but to celebrate the continuing discovery that heroes came in all forms. Zethkri watched from his post as thousands of beings filled the gardens. Crystalline Asari harmonized with gaseous nebulans, while Altarian officers shared tactical discussions with Valorian warriors. Children from dozens of species played together using games Tommy had taught them, their laughter creating a symphony that would have been impossible before the war. The formal ceremony would begin at sunset, but the real celebration was already happening in countless small interactions between beings who had learned to see past their differences. Tommy approached the memorial, carrying a new addition to his daily flower arrangement, a small potted plant that he carefully placed beside the tomb. "What is that, young friend?" Zethkri asked. "It's a forget-me-not," Tommy explained, gently adjusting the plant's position. "My mom found seeds from Earth. She said Great-Grandpa Tom always planted them in his garden because they reminded him that small things could be beautiful and important. The symbolism was perfect," Zethkri reflected. Small things that refused to be forgotten, just like the act of honesty that had changed galactic history. Counselor Vexthara materialized nearby, her crystalline form resonating with harmonics of deep satisfaction. "Guardian Zethkri, the transformation here has exceeded our most optimistic projections. Memorial sites across the galaxy are reporting similar increases in interspecies cooperation. The boy's influence extends far beyond what any of us imagined," Zethkri agreed. "His approach to meeting new beings has become a template for diplomatic first contact protocols. Indeed, the Galactic Council had formally adopted what they called the Mitchell methodology for initial contact with newly discovered species. The approach emphasized curiosity over caution, friendship over formal protocol, and finding common ground over highlighting differences. Tommy had revolutionized diplomacy simply by being himself. As the afternoon progressed, Zethkri noticed a familiar figure approaching through the crowd. Admiral Korath walked alongside a young Altarian who bore the golden insignia of a newly commissioned officer. "Guardian," Korath greeted formally, then gestured to his companion. "I would like you to meet Lieutenant Vexthor. Recently graduated from the Academy with highest honors in interspecies cooperation studies." The young officer stepped forward with traditional Altarian precision, but his greeting carried warmth that would have been unthinkable in previous generations. "It is an honor to meet the guardian of the sacred tomb. I have studied the Mitchell protocols extensively." Tommy looked up from arranging his flowers with interest. "Are you really learning about Great-Grandpa Tom in school?" Lieutenant Vexthor's formal posture relaxed as he addressed the boy. "Your great-grandfather's story is now part of standard curriculum across the galaxy. But more than that, your approach to friendship has become a model for how different species can work together." "I just treat everyone like they might become my friend," Tommy said with characteristic simplicity. "Great-Grandpa Tom taught my dad that everyone has something good in them if you look for it." This philosophy had indeed transformed galactic society in ways both large and small. Trade negotiations proceeded more smoothly when negotiators approached each other as potential friends rather than adversaries. Scientific collaboration flourished when researchers focused on shared curiosity rather than species loyalty. Even military exercises became more effective when combined forces emphasized cooperation over competition. Dr. Yilith approached with her latest research findings. "The social transformation continues to accelerate," she reported. "We're seeing decreased interspecies conflict, increased cultural exchange, and remarkable innovations emerging from collaborative projects." "What kind of innovations?" Tommy asked, always eager to learn about new discoveries. "Medical breakthroughs combining Asari harmonic healing with human adaptive medicine," Dr. Yilith explained. "Altarian precision engineering enhanced by Valorian honor protocols. Nebular environmental management integrated with human agricultural techniques. Species are discovering that their different approaches create synergies none could achieve alone." It was exactly the kind of cooperation that had made victory in the Void War possible, now extended to peacetime development. The galaxy was becoming stronger through diversity rather than despite it. As sunset approached, the formal ceremony began. Speakers from each major species shared reflections on the meaning of sacrifice and the importance of unity. But the most moving moment came when Tommy was invited to speak about his great-grandfather. Standing before thousands of beings from across the galaxy, the 9-year-old boy spoke with the same honest simplicity that had started everything. "Great-Grandpa Tom would be amazed to see all of you here together," Tommy began, his young voice carrying clearly through the Memorial Gardens. He always said the best part of teaching was watching his students become friends with each other. "I think that's what's happening now, but with whole planets instead of just classrooms." The gathered crowd listened with rapt attention as Tommy continued. "When I came here a year ago, I was scared I had done something wrong. I wanted to be arrested because Great-Grandpa Tom taught me to take responsibility for my actions. But Mr. Zethkri showed me that sometimes what looks like doing wrong is actually doing right, in a way you didn't expect." Zethkri felt his secondary heart skip at being mentioned in the boy's speech. Over the past year, their friendship had become one of the most meaningful relationships of his long life. "I learned that Great-Grandpa Tom became a hero, not because he was better than other people, but because he cared about people enough to help them even when it was scary. And I think all of you are heroes too because you care enough about each other to keep learning how to be friends." Tommy paused, looking out at the diverse assembly with the fearless openness that had charmed beings across the galaxy. Great-Grandpa Tom always said that the best way to honor people who did brave things was to do brave things yourself. So I guess the best way to honor him is to keep being brave enough to make new friends, even when they look different or come from far away. The response was overwhelming. Asari harmonics blended with Altarian battle cries and Valorian honor chants, while Nebulan forms shifted into celebratory patterns. Species that had no common language found common cause in honoring the wisdom of a human child. As the ceremony concluded and beings began to disperse, Tommy approached Zethkri one final time. "Mr. Zethkri," he said seriously, "I have something important to ask you." The familiar phrase made Zethkri's mandibles click with amusement. "What is your question, young friend?" "A year ago I asked you to arrest me for stealing. You didn't do it even though I confessed. Was that because you knew I was wrong about what I had done?" Zethkri considered his answer carefully. "I did not arrest you because I recognized that your actions came from love, not criminal intent. But more than that, I sensed that you possessed something our galaxy desperately needed. What was that?" "The courage to admit mistakes, the wisdom to seek consequences, and the heart to honor those who came before you," Zethkri replied. "Those qualities have proven more valuable than any military weapon or diplomatic treaty." Tommy smiled with the radiant joy that had become his trademark. "So I was right to confess even though there wasn't really anything to confess about?" "You were right to follow your conscience," Zethkri confirmed. "That is the lesson your great-grandfather would want you to remember. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to unexpected outcomes, but the rightness of the action remains unchanged." As Tommy's parents approached to take him home, the boy paused for one last look at the memorial that had become the center of his universe. "Thank you, Great-Grandpa Tom," he whispered to the towering crystal structure. "Thank you for teaching me that being honest and caring about people is the most important thing, even when it's scary." The words carried across the evening air, reaching the hearts of beings from 100 different worlds. In that moment, every visitor understood that they had witnessed something profound. The continuing legacy of a teacher who had given his life to protect students he would never meet, carried forward by a great-grandson who approached every stranger as a potential friend. Zethkri remained at his post as the gardens emptied, but his duty had evolved beyond simple guardianship. He now protected not just a tomb, but a symbol of what the galaxy could become when beings chose courage over fear, cooperation over conflict, and love over indifference. The unknown soldier had a name now, and that name had taught the galaxy that heroes were not born different. They were ordinary beings who chose to be extraordinary when the moment demanded it. And in a 9-year-old boy who had asked to be arrested for loving his great-grandfather too much. That legacy continued to grow, one friendship at a time.